Dylan Gilbert, who is Privacy Policy Advisor at the National Institutes for Standards and Technology. He's in the Privacy Engineering program there at NIST. Prior to joining NIST, he was a policy counsel at Public Knowledge, and he's been involved in the development of the NIST privacy framework. So that's what he's going to be discussing. I see you've already pulled up your slides.
Yeah. Hi, Todd, and hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah, we can hear you fine. Great.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me today to talk about the NIST privacy framework. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk about a great and important topic with regard to surveillance and some of the ways that our NIST privacy framework tool might be able to help organizations that may be looking to do privacy risk management and cybersecurity risk management around surveillance issues. So a little bit about myself. Yes, as Todd mentioned, I'm with National Institute of Standards and Technology. We are a non-regulatory agency within the Department of Commerce. I work for the Privacy Engineering Program, which our mission is to support the development of trustworthy information systems. So I'm a lawyer by training, and I have to admit, so I participated in my prior role during the development of the NIST privacy framework as a stakeholder. And I do have to admit, when I first started or taking a look at the framework, it was a little bit of a head scratcher for me. Lawyers predictably view privacy through the lens of law, policy, or compliance. This document really has cybersecurity risk management in its DNA. Many of you might be familiar with the NIST cybersecurity framework. You'll see as we walk through here, under the hood of the privacy framework, that there are significant similarities with the cybersecurity framework, and that's by design because the frameworks are meant to be able to be used together to help facilitate collaboration between cybersecurity and privacy teams around risk management activities. So the privacy framework was released in January, version 1.0. It's been downloaded over 20,000 times in over 40 countries. So we're really thrilled to see that stakeholders are using it, adopting it, and hope that if you haven't taken a look yet, that you will sometime soon. There's a lot to cover with this document, so I'm not going to spend, I won't be able to have time to cover everything. So I want to touch on some highlights, and again, with an eye towards the surveillance topic. But before we get into some of the specifics, I do like to lay out, what is the privacy framework? What is it not? What it is the product of an open and transparent development process. It is voluntary. It is law and technology agnostic, meaning that an organization can use it regardless of the governing law or regulation or regulations that it is subject to, regardless of the region or industry sector. And it's flexible. It's meant to meet the user organization where it's at. It's also importantly publicly available for free, and as mentioned before, fully compatible with the cybersecurity framework. What it is not is it is not a compliance checklist. We think that it can help organizations reach their compliance goals, but the privacy framework takes a risk-based approach to privacy. So among other benefits, we think this provides flexibility and future-proofing to respond to privacy risk, which, as we all know, is a highly dynamic issue. So let's talk about the value proposition real quick. This is really the heart of what the framework is about. The privacy framework supports organizations in three key ways. First of all, building customer trust. Customer trust is critical for any organization that is processing data. And the privacy framework can help organizations to build this trust by supporting ethical decision-making in product and service design or deployment that optimizes beneficial uses of data while minimizing adverse consequences for individuals' privacy and society as a whole. Customer trust can in turn drive business and growth, which allows for innovations in new products and services. And then privacy risk management practices can then be applied to those new products and services in a kind of a virtuous cycle, excuse me. And as current events have illustrated, and this has always been the case with technology, of course, but certainly, you know, the COVID-19 global pandemic has further underscored just how critical trust in technologies, in particular data processing at scale, can be when it comes to the protection of user privacy. So we think that this tool can help organizations to build that trust. As I mentioned at the top, it can also help fulfill compliance obligations. And while it's law and regulation agnostic, the approach is to help organizations identify key outcomes and activities that map to their compliance obligations. So then they can demonstrate which outcomes are helping them meet those obligations, and actually demonstrate all the activities they are carrying out to meet their compliance obligations. So this helps organizations to establish traceability with their products and services and answer the important question of how they're meeting compliance obligations. Finally, and importantly, the framework facilitates communication about privacy practices across the ecosystem, whether that's with individual customers, business customers, or assessors and regulators. You know, the broad shifting nature of privacy has made it difficult to communicate clearly about privacy risks, both within and between organizations and with individuals. So we intended the framework to fill that gap, to provide a common language about talking about risk, which we'll cover in the next slide. So this is an important part of the framework, and one that I wanted to spend a few minutes on, just to make sure that you know, I can articulate how cybersecurity risks relate to privacy risks in the conception of the privacy framework. So we worked with stakeholders to develop this diagram. Starting on the left side, we have cybersecurity risks, which are commonly understood to arise from the loss of CIA confidentiality, integrity, or availability. The question then became, well, what is a privacy risk? Is it distinct from cybersecurity risk? So you can see that we do define a privacy risk in a specific way. It's the likelihood that individuals will experience problems resulting from data processing and the impact should they occur. So these problems, whether singly or as part of larger groups, that can result from data processing, can be expressed in various ways, but we describe them as ranging from dignity type effects such as embarrassment or stigmas, to more tangible harms such as discrimination, economic loss, or physical harm. So you'll see that we have key terms defined here on the right, which was an important part of establishing this common privacy risk vocabulary. The common vocabulary already exists in cybersecurity, but less so in privacy. So, you know, we use likelihood and impact language to mirror cybersecurity, but here in privacy, we focus on the problems that individuals could experience instead of threats and vulnerabilities. So, you know, when we look at the overlap here, this would be the kind of cybersecurity related privacy risks that we might be familiar with when it comes to things like a data breach, where you know, this data leakage, so to speak, or this breach could be the result of an unauthorized access, but it could actually down the line lead to problems for individuals that are associated with you know, with privacy risks. So this could be a situation, for example, where there may be that data gets in the hands of a bad actor that uses it for identity theft. So, you know, certainly we do have privacy risks that are related to cybersecurity risks, but then we believe that there are privacy risks that kind of stand alone, so to speak, outside of what would be traditional cybersecurity risks. So here's kind of, you know, a pretty simple articulation of the connective tissue that we try to draw between you know, privacy risk and organizational risk. We call it an enterprise risk management tool for a reason, and we think that part of the framework's utility is helping to draw this connection that we're looking at here. You know, individuals can experience the direct impact of, you know, problems from data processing, and then organizations can in turn experience a knock-on impact, whether that's things like, you know, non-compliance costs, harms to reputation or internal culture, or other things. And, you know, so the privacy risk and the problems that individuals experience resulting from data processing need to be made visible to organizations. So we hope that in framing it in this way can help bring privacy into parity with some of the other risks that organizations are trying to manage in their overall risk portfolio. So one thing that I do want to mention here with regard to like a privacy risk assessment, we do have an entire appendix in the framework, Appendix D, which provides some resources around privacy risk management practices. So this would include things like organizing preparatory resources, which would be, understanding role assignments, understanding the enterprise risk, establishing and understanding the enterprise risk management strategy, identifying key stakeholders, and system product service design artifacts, for example. Again, the thing to keep in mind with the privacy framework is it's more like a menu. We think of it as things that organizations can choose as they look to build out their privacy risk management program, but none of it is required. It's all, should be tailored to the organization's needs. Appendix D also provides our own privacy risk model. Organizations don't have to use it, but we do have a privacy risk assessment methodology that we cite to for organizations if they want to use our risk model to conduct their privacy risk assessments. So let's talk real quickly about the framework structure. So for those of you that are familiar with the cybersecurity framework, you don't have to squint too hard to see that this is quite similar. We have something called the core, which is an increasingly granular set of activities and outcomes that enable an organizational dialogue about managing privacy risk. We also have framework profiles, which is sort of a selection of specific functions, categories, and subcategories in the core that the organization has prioritized. So, an organization may say, hey, where are we right now with our privacy program? Look at the outcomes and activities in the core and create a current profile, the core sort of functioning as a menu. And then saying, okay, well, where do we need to be? There may be some gaps. There may be some outcomes or activities that we want to get to. Let's put that in our target profile. We then can, an organization can then use implementation tiers to communicate about whether it has sufficient processes and resources in place to achieve that target profile. So, one of the considerations that we've been focusing on at NIST recently is the workforce issue. Is the privacy program, is the workforce in place that can manage privacy risk? If not, what does that need to look like? And how can an organization, get that staffing put in place to reach their target? So we think that this structure is useful not only for making it easier for organizations to use both frameworks, both being the privacy framework and the cybersecurity framework, but also supports the key attributes of the privacy framework, which is to be risk and outcome based. And so here's just a quick illustration of the general sort of flow of the core, where we have high-level outcomes in the functions, more granular outcomes and activities in the categories, and then the most granular would be subcategories. So, I'll talk in a minute about, how an organization may pick and choose from the core in order to reach its desired outcomes. So here I did want to provide some concrete subcategory examples so that, and these would be ones that would be tied to the topic at hand today, just to get a sense of what I mean when I say outcomes and activities. So here we have 3 subcategories from our control function. And you can see that the first one is data is our process to limit observability and linkability. So again, this isn't a prescriptive requirement. That's not how we designed the framework. The framework is designed instead for an organization to have these options available as building blocks and to say, okay, well, we do want to, try to process our data to meet our risk tolerance. So what's the extent to which we need to process to limit observability? I just got a signal from my earbuds that they might be messing up on me. So I'm going to, well, let's continue. Data are processed to limit the identification of individuals. This would be a second outcome here, which is a bit different, right? So in the first one, it could be a matter of actually, as a practical matter, angling a surveillance camera so that it limits the observability of people. It may limit the observability of folks that are in the background. P2 would be getting at using potentially de-identification privacy techniques to process the data in a way that would limit identification of individuals. And then for P4, system or device configurations permit selective collection. So here we have more of a privacy control. I'm switching away.
I'm sorry, did we lose sound?
Yeah, I think did we lose you? No, you're very, very, very faint, Dylan.
So how can we use the privacy framework? There's a number of different ways that we can do this. The first way would be just as using informative references. So,
Dylan, I'm sorry, we still can't hear you. Can you speak up a little bit?
Jill, I hear that you're talking.
Okay, now your audio is fine now. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
To apologize.
No, that's my mistake. I wanted to make sure I didn't mess that up. Okay, so moving on real quickly to how to use the privacy framework. I don't have time to go through all of this, but you can see that there are a number of different ways that organizations can use it, whether that's informative references, whether that's to inform buying decisions, or to establish or improve a privacy program. We use a ready, set, go model to walk organizations through the process. And we also provide some hypothetical use cases so organizations can understand how they might use the privacy framework based on their needs. This was a slide that I wanted to focus on here, which is a real world example of how organizations have been using the privacy framework. So in this situation, we had an organization that wanted to have a conversation with its leadership around building out the privacy program. And so what they did at the organization was they took the functions, which were the highest level outcomes within the privacy framework. They mapped those to the program components. And what they were able to do was create sort of a green, yellow, and red color coding for where their program was at and then where they wanted to be. So when we look back at the subcategories that I mentioned earlier around disassociated processing, they could say, hey, we don't have these controls in place, but we want to get there. So, right now we are in the red, but we want to get to the yellow. We need more resources to get to this place. So in this regard, we really think that the privacy framework can be useful to facilitate the kind of conversations that need to take place for whether that's collaboration between the privacy program and the cybersecurity program, or simply to have an advocacy conversation with leadership about helping to bolster the privacy risk management practices. One other thing, I noticed, during Mark's presentation, there were questions around, or some considerations at least around understanding contracts as a best practice. We do have that outcome that's located in our govern function. And even before that step, we have in our identify function, an outcome around data processing ecosystem identification and risk management. So there, as part of the outcome, it would be parties are identified, prioritized, and assessed using a risk assessment. So in this regard, an organization can say, well, we do want to get to a place where we are understanding our contracts. So, we choose from our identify function this outcome around, identifying our ecosystem parties. And then from the govern function, we find the outcome around understanding contracts, and we make sure that we have systems and processes in place to meet those outcomes. So that's a little bit of an example of how the privacy framework could be used, but there are a number of other different ways that it could be used as well. It could be used, for example, to more closely integrate and program cybersecurity risk management practices with its privacy risk management practices. It could also be used during the system development lifecycle. So if there is a system that is being built that may implicate surveillance, for example, what we found during that process is that it was less useful perhaps to create a broader profile, like a profile around an organizational level profile, but instead create sort of mini profiles for each stage in the system development lifecycle. And that way, an organization could really, tailor its risk management practices to, the entire system development lifecycle in a way that makes sense and can be manageable for the organization. So, couple next steps here before I stop and we do some Q&A. We really would love, this dog here belongs to a member of our team, so this dog is not up for adoption. However, the NIST privacy framework certainly is, and we hope that you will adopt and provide feedback on the implementation. This is a living document. And so in that regard, we want to hear from stakeholders about how they are using it, how it can be improved so that organizations are making the most of the resources that we provide. We would also love if you contribute resources to our resource repository. A couple of the things that are in the resources repository, one would be what we call crosswalks. A crosswalk would be a mapping between a particular requirement, let's say from a law or policy, to a privacy framework outcome. We currently have a map for the GDPR, which takes GDPR requirements and maps them to privacy framework outcomes and vice versa. And that way, if you have a requirement under the GDPR, for example, for data deletion, you can locate where that outcome may be in the NIST privacy framework. We also have a place where organizations can contribute profiles, and we have some libraries here. We would love to see how libraries may be building out profiles for their own risk management practices, and they can feel free to contribute those to the resource repository. We also have some informative references, and so for example, we link to our control catalog in this special publication 853. So that if an organization is looking to implement some controls to help build out a system, for example, that may manage privacy risk, if it's a surveillance system, they can look to some potential controls within the control catalog to help with that implementation. So briefly, I just wanted to talk about a couple key work streams that we have going on to highlight for you all. One in particular that I think is relevant to the surveillance topic, which is our de-identification techniques work stream. We have created a blog series on differential privacy in our NIST collaboration space. This series is designed to help business process owners and privacy program personnel understand basic concepts about differential privacy and applicable use cases, and to help privacy engineers and IT professionals implement the tools. So our longer term goal is to transform this series into more in-depth guidelines on differential privacy. We just released a blog post, number 2 in the series, which is on threat models. So we hope that you will go check it out on our website. Finally, workforce. I'd be remiss not to mention our workforce work stream. We actually have a virtual workshop that's taking place next week. It's hosted by the International Association of Privacy Professionals. What we are doing is we are working on building out a workforce taxonomy. So we talked about workforce as an important resource for privacy risk management. We want to build a taxonomy that identifies, the tasks, skills, knowledge, and work roles that are necessary to create a workforce capable of managing privacy risk. And we frame it in that way because it might not necessarily just be traditional privacy professionals that should be handling risk management practices. We think that that it's possible that other roles within an organization, such as in product development or IT, should have some requisite knowledge and skills around privacy. And so the idea here is to build out a taxonomy based on stakeholder feedback. So we really hope that you'll consider at least attending the plenary sessions. Our working sessions at this stage are unfortunately sold out, but we did release some pre-read materials, which are posted on our website, which I can circulate to you all, which provide some questions that we have for stakeholders around building out the workforce taxonomy. Really quickly, here is a few important links for you. Link to our website, our mailing list. Please feel free to contact us at any time. And we're happy to answer your questions and learn about how you might be using the framework. So with that, I'll pause for some Q&A. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dylan. Appreciate that. Question from one of our attendees. Can you provide some real-world examples of an organization that has used this privacy framework? It would be particularly relevant to see how libraries or universities have used this. Thanks. Is that part of the information that you had in the resource repository, I think you mentioned?
So we don't have information specifically on who is using it. We do have, if you look to our website, we do have some quotes from folks that are talking about the framework in a positive light. And so we have had for example, I'm trying to think now off the top of my head some of the organizations that have been using this. I believe Equifax has, I believe Workday. We also have, local governments. The Arlington city government is using the privacy framework. So don't have a deep knowledge of who is using it off the top of my head. In particular, libraries and universities. However, we hope that they are. And if I'm not sure if I would be able to find that information myself, but it might be worth asking around, and I can try to see if I can find any examples for your attendees.
Sure. And you had mentioned the resource repository. Is that linked from this website here, the Privacy Framework website?
Yes, yeah. So you will be able to find the resource repository as a menu item in the Privacy Framework website. And you will see that there are places where people not only can look and see the resources that we have in place, like such as the aforementioned GDPR crosswalk, but also they can submit their own. So we do know of a CCPA crosswalk, which is in the works. And we're hoping to continue to build those out. By the way, there doesn't have to be only one. So if an organization that is in the audience today really wants to take a shot at creating a mapping between GDPR and our privacy framework, we welcome additional resources. Our repository is as good as our engagement. So we really hope and invite participants to contribute resources themselves. And all of the instructions for doing so are on our website.
Okay, great. So that's something that the community can contribute to.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Another question has to, and just for the attendees, I know this will be in the slides, which we'll post, but Jill has also posted those links into the chat if you want to look at them this afternoon. In terms of a process and a project, to what extent did NIST, how open was this process? To what extent are people able to, engage in NIST's development process?
Good question. Yeah, so the development process took place over a year, and it was a very open and transparent process. We sent out a request for comment, based on and said, we're soliciting stakeholder feedback. We intend to build out a privacy framework of the similar to the cybersecurity framework. We then held 3 public workshops in cities around the country that had a diverse set of stakeholders from across sectors, and both private and public sector stakeholders that came in. As I mentioned, I myself was one that came in to provide feedback on questions that NIST had on how to develop a useful resource. And again, you know, you can contact us at any time if you have thoughts on how to improve. You know, feel free to reach out via the privacy framework at NIST.gov's address there. And we will be, you know, holding future, you know, this is version 1.0, and so we will be, of course, revisiting this to do some updates. Probably not this year, but in the coming year. And so that will be another opportunity for stakeholders to just talk about how they're using it and ways in which we can improve.
All right. Well, fantastic. I hope people who are on the call do reach out and do get engaged.
Great. Thank you, Todd.
Great. Thank you.